Welcome. So glad that you are here. Welcome. I want to wish all of you a lovely, lovely evening. I hope all of you have a lovely weekend and that I can be a good part of your start of the weekend. I was hoping, you know what I think I might just do? This is going to be weird. I'm going to turn this around because I have got the camera on the wrong side. So I am just going to turn this around. So don't get dizzy. Don't get dizzy. Just stay in your seats. Close your eyes if you get seasick. And I am just going to flip this camera right around. Did that work? Oh, no, it did not work. Orientation is locked. Rotate device back. Goodness gracious. Well, we're going to be stuck with the camera on the wrong side. That is the iPhone for you. There's a reason they don't allow us to buy Huawei here in the United States, and that is because this is what we're dealing with the iPhone. So in case any of you thought I was a highly produced shill for spreading disinformation, you just saw me attempt to turn my camera around and fail. Because my iPhone would not do it. So now you know that I am definitely not an overproduced drone trying to influence you. I am definitely a real dude sitting here in a real conference room trying to talk at you with my camera on the wrong side. So there you go. Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. I'm going to try to orient closer to this camera on this other side. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. People are getting unsubscribed. I'm constantly getting messages from people saying that they've been unsubscribed. So if you have been unsubscribed, be sure to hit the subscribe button. If you want to get notifications to find out when I'm going to do the next one of these, be sure to hit the notifications bell. And it'd be great if you could post this on Twitter. You could post this on Reddit. You could post it on Facebook. If you post it on Twitter, there's a good chance I might retweet you. If I find your tweet, I might actually retweet you. So you might get the Caleb bump if you put it on Twitter, put it on Reddit, put it on Facebook, etc. We got a lot of things to talk about. I know everybody wants me to talk about Gamestop, so I will be talking about Gamestop. So don't worry, I will talk about Gamestop. I've got plenty to say about Gamestop. I'm going to not try to say it that way, though. We're going to say Gamestop. 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 We're going to talk about Gamestop. We'll talk about that whole thing. Don't worry, it will be covered. I've got plenty to say about it, as you can imagine. I hope that what I say is a little bit different than what other people say. I always try to bring a unique level of analysis. I try to not say what everyone else says. I try to bring you an understanding rooted in the Marxian tradition, dialectical and historical materialism, but also rooted in our long-standing history. So we'll be doing that for sure. I want to also draw everyone's attention. Why can't China build up DPRK like the USA did it? All right. China build up DPRK. All right. So I want to. Okay. Rousseau, pre-Marxist. Influence on China. Gus Hall. Wow, you guys are rolling in with the super chats, and that's great. Gus Hall. All righty. Very good. Very, very good, folks. Glad to answer your questions. We'll be doing things the way we normally do things, where I give my opening remarks, and after I give my opening remarks, we do our roll call. I'm so annoyed to have the camera on that other side. My goodness. We do our roll call, and then after that, after we do our roll call, then I will answer your super chat questions, and then we're done. But I want to draw everyone's attention to the fact that tomorrow evening there's going to be a Center for Political Innovation webcast. Alrighty. Trad. Versions. Why? Okay, alrighty, just writing down the super chats. I know we all have plenty of things we want to talk about, and that's good. Keep them rolling in, right? The more the merrier. Tomorrow evening, there's going to be a Center for Political Innovation web conference. It'll be streamed here on this channel. The link is down below. It'll be streamed, and we're going to have a special guest. The special guest is going to be musical performer Dave Rovics. Musical performer David Rovics will be giving a special musical performance for the Center for Political Innovation. And that's going to be amazing. I have been a big fan of David Rovics for a long time. So to have him join a webcast that I'll be participating in, that is just something that gives me a great thrill. And thank you for your super chat, Tunoi. Tahitian Fire, much appreciated. That gives me great joy. So be sure to tune in tomorrow evening. Paul Shepard, the musician, he will be performing, as will several speakers from Students and Youth for a New America and the Center for Political Innovation. And we're also going to have a couple guest speakers from Iran. We're going to have some Iranian students that are going to give a presentation about the need for peace and the threats of war against Iran. It'll be great to have some youth from Iran who will be addressing the web conference as well. So it's going to be quite a super duper web conference tomorrow evening. It'll be the fourth web conference the Center for Political Innovation has ever done, featuring David Rovics, featuring students from Iran, featuring speeches, featuring music. It's going to be a great evening. So be sure that you tune in tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If not, you can catch it afterwards. But it's going to be a really, really fun evening. There's something about our web conferences. We always give people a little bit of a high. You know, we kind of play off of each other's energy, and we answer people's questions, and we take turns kind of bouncing off each other. And sometimes they kind of take on kind of a magic of their own. These web conferences are really something special. So I'm really excited about the Center for Political Innovation. I'm going to be really looking forward to hearing what the young guy Max, who's from Students and Youth for America, New America Beltway, is going to speak. Lily from Students and Youth for a New America in Georgia is going to speak as well. We're going to hear the music of Dave Rovics. We're going to hear the music of Paul Shepard. I'm going to give a 40-minute keynote address. We're going to hear from some Iranian students who will be available during the Q&A to answer questions about Iran. That's going to be exciting. Tune in. Don't miss it. It should be fun. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew about what's happening tomorrow night. All you do to participate is just click on the link below and tune in at 7 p.m. It's going to be great. It's going to be really, really, really great. So be sure to tune in tomorrow night for our exciting web conference from the Center for Political Innovation. In other note, folks, I'm sure you all wanted to hear me talk about Gamestop. Gamestop, right? What's going on with Gamestop? What's happening? I mean, what's going on? Folks, in order to understand what happened with Gamestop, you need to understand a concept that Karl Marx spoke about called fictitious capital. Fictitious capital. In volume 3 of Karl Marx's Capital, a section that was put together from Marx's notes after his death, volume 3, The Process of Capitalist Production as a Whole, Karl Marx describes a phenomenon of what he refers to as fictitious capital. Why do some people claim socialism is higher taxes? Gamestop fiasco uniting people of different ideologies. Higher crises. Stop. Different ideologies. So, Karl Marx wrote in Capital Volume 3, to the extent that the depreciation or increase in value of this paper is independent of the movement of value of the actual capital that it represents, the wealth of the nation is just as great before as after its depreciation or increase in value. He also writes, unless this depreciation reflected an actual stoppage of production and of traffic on canal and railways, or a suspension of already initiated enterprise, or a squandering capital in a positively worthless venture, the nation did not grow 1 cent poorer by the bursting of this soap bubble of nominal money capital. And what is Marx describing? He's describing that as capitalism is developing, right? Marx is writing in the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s. As capitalism is developing, you have the emergence of the corporation, right? The corporation. Used to be, you had individual capitalists who owned their enterprises. But suddenly we get corporations that are chartered by the government and sell stock. We have a stock market where people can become stock owners of corporations. They sell their stocks. The value of these stocks goes up and down. And we have the rise of the modern stock market. And we have the rise of capital made not by investing in any particular corporation, but just based on betting on what the stock market does. And you have the rise of a whole field of capitalist economics they call speculation. Speculation is money that is made by essentially betting on whether or not a stock will go up or down. David Harvey, in interpreting Marx's concept of fictitious capital, he writes that fictitious capital is capital without any material basis in commodities or productive activity. In essence, nowadays, you have two kinds of capital. You have the physical economy and the speculative economy. You have actual capital and you have fictitious capital or financialized capital. A lot of the people that are millionaires and billionaires have money and have made lots of money, and that money is not tied to anything real. They do not become millionaires and billionaires by starting a steel mill and hiring people to make steel, selling steel. They did not become millionaires and billionaires by setting up an oil well and hiring people to extract that oil, refine it, selling that oil. Didn't become millionaires and billionaires by, inventing a new computer program. Instead, they became millionaires and billionaires by betting on what a company would do. And this is the process of money being made out of other money. Fictitious capital. Marx writes about how if the fictitious capital were to decrease, if the stock market were to go down, if the money of the Wall Street speculator decreased, the nation, he writes, would not grow 1 cent poorer by the bursting of this soap bubble of nominal money capital. This money, this speculative money, has absolutely no relationship whatsoever to the economy. Average people don't get richer or poorer. More goods and services don't get sold or created. It has nothing to do with your life. Physical economy, the real economy are things that affect you. How much does the food that you go buy at the store cost? That is a physical economy question. How much is your rent or your mortgage payment every month? That is a physical economy question. Are the roads in your town or city decent? Are they being paved properly? How much taxes are you going to have to pay? What is the value of your home if you're a home owner? How much do you get paid at your job? How secure is your job? Right? These are physical economy questions. They are related to real houses, real food, real wages, real jobs, real production, real commodities. That's physical economy. But as capitalism is developing in the 1860s, 1870s, Marx is noticing that there's the rise of this whole other field of capitalism, where people learn how to make money without making anything. The Wall Street speculator makes money by having money. He takes money that he already has, and he bets on what the stock market is going to do. And if his bet is correct, he makes more money. I talk about derivatives, right? This is all the standard populist critique of Wall Street. There are all these very, very wealthy people who make lots of money moving money around on computer screens all day, or having an artificial intelligence bot move money around on computer screens all day. But they don't actually make anything. No one gets any richer from the wealth that they do, except them. Nothing is created. This is speculation. And for a long time, people have loved to hate on the Wall Street speculator class. They're making money by having money. Now, obviously, if you're going to have an economy where millions and millions and billions of dollars are at stake in betting on what the market can do, you obviously have to have some rules. Right? That's why they have rules against what they call insider trading. Right? If somebody works at a company, they're going to know ahead of time things that might affect the price of the stock. So they can't go out and tell everybody. They can't just go out and tell everybody what's going to happen. Because if they do that, then all those people will bet based on what they know. That'll affect things. Oh, one rule affects me directly. I am a journalist. I appear on television. So I don't own any stock. Why? If I were to own some stock, I could use, in theory, my position in the press. If I, as someone who works in the media, owned stock in, Republic Steel Corporation, in theory, I could do a story on how Republic Steel is doing great, and that would make the value of my stock go up. That's illegal. Right? Those of us who work in the press can't own stock, because if we did, COVID vaccine, because if we did, we could use our position to benefit ourselves. We can't do that. Right? One thing you can't do is called market manipulation, where everyone gets together and says, okay, let's all do this on a certain day. Let's all get together and do something on a certain day to affect the market. And then we can all make money off it. You can't do that. That's called market manipulation. Price fixing, another thing you can't do. If you're selling a product, you can't sit down with all the other companies and say, let's all agree that the price is going to be this. You can't do it. But here's the problem, and here's the crux of the problem, and this is why this all relates to the Gamestop thing. You can't do this in theory, but it is extremely hard to regulate this. Silicon Valley. It is extremely hard to regulate this. Regulating these kind of things is very, very, very hard to do. It's very hard to do. It is illegal to sit down with other people and say, let's manipulate the market. But in order to convict someone for doing that, you have to somehow show that that's what they did. And it is very hard to prove intent. In order to convict somebody for insider trading, you have to show somebody giving the information to somebody, and that person then basing their executive orders, basing their stock buying decisions on that information. Again, very hard to show intent. So what took place is that some people on the website known as Reddit got together, and from what I understand, many of them were very careful not to explicitly break the law when it came to market manipulation. Now, obviously, that'll be decided by a legal expert. I am no legal expert, I don't know, but they got together. A lot of super chats tonight. That's okay. They got together and they said, hey, did they say? They got together and it seemed like a bunch of people bought stock in this Gamestop company, or didn't buy stock, or got together, and there was some activities organized on Reddit that had a very, very big impact on Gamestop, this corporation. And as a result, all kinds of corporations and all kinds of Wall Street stock traders that had bet based on what would naturally happen in the market, they thought, lost lots of money, and a lot of people on Reddit made some money. That's what happened. And many people have pointed out that this is exactly what big corporations do. Just a super chat for fun, beverage on me. Well, thank you, Sam. This is what big corporations do all the time. Big corporations, and especially notorious, are what they call short sellers. Short selling is betting that a stock will go down, right? You're betting that a stock will go down, the stock will become less valuable. And that technically, yes, it is illegal for people to get together and say, let's manipulate the market. But there are ways that people can approach doing that without fully breaking the law. And that this kind of speculative scheme, where money can be made out of nothing, goes on all the time in capitalism. So apparently, through a new app called Robinhood, some average Joes or Janes on the internet got in on the game. They got in on the game. And they made the market do things that all the computer apps and all the professional Wall Street stock traders didn't expect. And now CNBC and all the voices representing Wall Street's mainstream, the regular big dogs on Wall Street, are very angry. They want blood. They want blood to run in the streets. They are furious. They want to crack down. Meanwhile, these are the folks that have resisted regulating Wall Street relentlessly. But now that somebody else is doing what they themselves do pretty regularly, now that average people on the internet have learned to play games with stocks, just like they've been playing games with stocks for years, and they've learned to, manipulate or not manipulate in the legal sense, but they've learned to have an impact on the stock market while possibly following the law. Now there's a call for more regulations all of a sudden. Right? Wall Street is constantly complaining that there's too much regulation. Oh, it's awful. It's out of control. We need more of a free market, get the government off our backs. But now that there are some other people who seem to have gotten in on the game and played around with GameStop, now these voices are calling for more regulation. Well, it's all given voice to popular outrage. Popular outrage about the fact that while the physical economy of the United States has diminished, right? Our roads are crumbling. The quality of our education is very low. The kind of actual production, thank you, MB, for the super chat. The amount of actual production that takes place in the United States is not what it once was, not anything like what it once was. Living standards are going down. The spending power of average Americans is decreasing. The next generation of workers makes much less money than their parents' generation make. We talk about low-wage, short-term service sector jobs, replacing the good jobs that once laid the basis for the American dream. All of this, while the fictitious capital, the speculative markets, have gotten bigger. Those folks who make money through things that are in no way connected to the physical economy are making more and more money than ever before. Meanwhile, the actual country, the actual physical economy of the country is worse, and it's getting worse and worse. Thank you, Eduardo. And that is what the Gamestop debacle, caper, Farrago, I don't know what you want to call it, the Gamestop fiasco has highlighted. But there is a significant gap between the speculative, fictitious market in the United States and the physical economy. We, in the United States, the American people, are getting poorer, while the Wall Street betting casino and playground is getting wealthier. That is what has been revealed. And this is what caused the financial, well, thank you, Chris. This is what caused the financial crisis of 2008. Let's not forget. The financial crisis of 2008 was a very similar situation. Average Americans were getting poorer, wages were dropping, living standards were going down. Wall Street, however, continued to make more and more money, derivative rip-off schemes, all of these things were going on. And eventually, the lack of a physical economy caught up with the illusions and the mirage of the speculative economy. I explained this, thank you, Olympia. I explained this to a crowd of people. Back in 2017, I gave a speech. And I said to them, Donald Trump says the economy is doing great right now. But I said, is your life getting any better? Are the people in your neighborhood wealthier than they were before? Is there more economic activity than ever before? Are you buying more things than you used to have? Are you getting paid more than you used to get paid? Is your life getting better? The answer of the audience was overwhelmingly no. Well, if your life is not getting better, if the life of people in your community and your neighborhood is not getting better, but the stock market is continuing to go up and up and up, that is a recipe for disaster. Because eventually, there will be a reconciling. There will be a reckoning. Workers are also consumers. Workers' real retirement tied to the stock market. Workers are also consumers. You drive our wages down. You get rid of the good-paying jobs. You reduce our ability to purchase things. You loot our neighborhoods. You make it so we don't even drink clean water in places like Flint. You set up a prison industrial complex to make profits from locking people in jail. You try to maximize the number of people with criminal records so that they're castigated as felons for their whole lives, and it's very hard for them to work. You push doctors to overprescribe opioids and have many lives destroyed by addiction. You do all this stuff. And Americans get poorer. Americans become poorer and poorer and poorer. American communities become more and more downtrodden and rotten. Life expectancy decreases. You do all of this, but you set up a bunch of derivative rip-off schemes, a bunch of speculative games, and the stock market numbers stay high, eventually there is a moment of reckoning, and it all comes crashing down. Capitalism cannot overcome the basic problem that Marx wrote about years ago. The basic problem that the worker can never buy back what he produces. I've explained it before, but I will explain it once again, because it bears repeating. Okay. Let's say that you are making a product, a widget, that costs $4. It is a $4 widget. The total cost of the widget is $4. Now, you're going to need supplies to make the widget. Say that costs $1. Right? You're going to need to ship the widget after you produce it. Let's say that costs another $1. And of course, you're going to need labor. You're going to need workers to create the widget. So the labor of the worker is $2. 1 plus 1 plus 2 equals 4. However, if you pay the worker $2, and you pay $1 for shipping, and you pay $1 for the supplies, the capitalist makes no profit. So instead, the capitalist profit is surplus value. Right? He cuts into the value put into the $4 product. The capitalist takes his profits, his surplus value, out of the worker. The value, some of the value put into the product by the worker is taken by the capitalist. So the supply is $1. The shipping is $1. The worker gets $1, even though he puts $2 of value into it, and the capitalist gets $1 in profits, and the total cost of the commodity is $4. Right? This is the basis of capitalist exploitation, mind you. Right? The worker puts $2 worth of value into it. He only gets $1 so that the capitalist can make profits. However, at the end of the day, the worker who sells his labor power in order to make the product is getting paid $1. The product costs $4. The worker can never buy back the product he produces. There is no way that $1 can be equal to $4. There is no way that the worker can buy back the product he produces. He's only paid a fraction of the overall value of the product. Even if you eliminated the capitalist, even if it was a worker owner, he still could not buy back the product he produces. The working class can never buy back the product that they produce. So naturally, under capitalism, you are going to have a situation. You're going to have a situation where you're going to have all kinds of products produced, but you're not going to have the worker be able to buy them. Capitalism naturally creates overproduction. There is always going to be more products than there is buying power for the worker. This is the natural problem of the capitalist mode of production. It is a built-in self-destructive mechanism. The capitalist is never able to sell the product he produces entirely. There is always going to be a situation where the worker can never fully buy back everything he produces. The capitalist never puts enough wages into the market to purchase all the products he sells. So what they call a glut, a G-L-U-T, a glut, a situation where there are all kinds of commodities that cannot be sold and businesses crash and the economy spins out of control, a glut is going to be a recurrent problem in the capitalist system. As long as workers sell their labor to capitalists to produce products, you're going to have the problem of gluts. Marx wrote a whole book about how, long before Karl Marx, capitalists were trying to figure out the problem, trying to figure this out. Marx wrote a book, Capital Volume 4, Theories of Surplus Value, trying to deal with this problem. Ricardo dealt with this problem. Adam Smith dealt with this problem. Malthus, the father of Malthusianism, they all dealt with this problem. How do we deal with this problem? That there are frequent gluts on the market. And in our time, the capitalists have developed all kinds of crazy mechanisms for trying to resolve that problem. They've got stock markets. They've got the Federal Reserve System. They have got all kinds of mechanisms for trying to stabilize a naturally unstable system. The capitalist system has this boom-bust cycle that at the end of the day, it still doesn't get over this problem. As long as production is organized for profits, you're going to have this problem. And the problem becomes exacerbated. It gets worse. Might as well show you this too. It gets worse the less you pay the worker. Good morning, Caleb. Please talk about what's going on in India, if possible, in the next live stream. I hardly know what's going on. All right, we'll talk about India. Okay. The capitalist cannot change how much the supply is cost. The capitalist cannot change how much the shipping of the item costs. But the capitalist can increase the percentage that he takes from the value by decreasing the role of the worker. With technology, he can hire fewer and fewer workers, and in doing so, he can maximize his profits. However, only the worker produces surplus value. The capitalist the profits can only cut into the value created by the worker. Can't cut into the other commodities, or not the other commodities, the other factors in the value of the overall product. So by eliminating and reducing the role of workers in production, by replacing workers with machines, you exacerbate this problem of the falling of overproduction. You have what's called the tendency for the falling rate of profit. The less and less the role of the worker in production is, the less profits in terms of the rate of profits that the capitalist can make. He's going to make a lower rate of profit per item because he can only extract profits from the surplus value created by the worker. And so you reduce the amount of labor involved in production, you're going to reduce the rate of profits. What did I do at the insurance company? Did you like it? So this is the problem. There's a whole effort to try and pull the wool over your eyes and convince you that you can't understand economics. If you can understand everything I just said to you, not that hard to understand, then you can understand what's going on with Gamestop, and you can understand why we need to get rid of capitalism. It's not that complicated. But there's a whole effort to make you think it's complicated, to make you think that, oh, you don't have a degree in economics, you can't understand what's going on. Well, you can understand what's going on. I just explained it to you. Next time someone asks you, you can pull out a notebook and you can explain it to your friends. It's not that hard to explain why capitalism is constantly collapsing, why the capitalist is exploiting the worker, why the physical economy and speculative markets anger everybody, why the stock market can go up but your life doesn't get better. It's not that complicated. You can explain it to your friends, and my hope is that you will do so. Now, I just wanted to conclude my opening remarks with one other topic, which is that this week we had Holocaust Remembrance Day. And it's worth noting that at a time, Holocaust Remembrance Day, remembering the horrendous crime, the Holocaust was one of the most horrendous events in human history, if not the most horrendous event, that it's important to talk about the fact that right now in Ukraine, monuments to those who fought the Nazis are being torn down, while monuments to Ukrainian nationalists who collaborated with the Nazis are being erected. And at the United Nations, Russia and many countries have put forward resolutions to condemn this kind of thing. And the United States has voted against them. That's worth pointing out. It's also worth pointing out that Auschwitz concentration camp, the horrendous concentration camp, death camp really, where millions were killed, was not liberated by U.S. troops. The crisis of overproduction is the primary basis of the cause of the boom-bust cycle in the capitalist economy. Production. It was Soviet troops that liberated Auschwitz concentration camp. IBM, the American Computer Corporation, ran a punch card machine that helped the Nazis keep track of the concentration camps and who was in them. Henry Ford was very friendly with the Nazis. Right? Coke Corporation, they made a special drink, Fanta Orange, that would be the Nazi drink, so they could collaborate with the Nazis. Right? Volkswagen got all kinds of free labor from concentration camp prisoners. The number of companies that collaborated with the fascists and Nazis during the Second World War is very massive. And ever since the Holocaust, there have been various attempts to understand what went on in the United States. And it's worth going over those various attempts. First of all, I think the ultimate reason that McCarthyism was defeated was maybe not the ultimate reason, but a big factor in why McCarthyism was defeated in the United States was because the Holocaust was less than a decade beforehand. McCarthyism got going in 1947, 1948, and by about 1954, it was cooling. By about 1954, McCarthyism was cooling. At that point, the Holocaust was less than a decade old. And part of the reason that many people in the United States were not willing to go along with McCarthyism was because McCarthyism reminded them of the Holocaust. The Nazis screamed at the top of their lungs against communists. And that was the justification the Nazis had for building their authoritarian police state. We got to stop the commies. We got to stop the Reds. The Nazis were obsessed with military spending and a military-industrial complex. And so the McCarthyist witch hunt in the United States, it rang a lot of bells for the Holocaust. People forget that in 1951, that's 6 years after the Holocaust, 1951, the U.S. Congress passed a law called the Maupin Internal Security Act. And that was a law that set up a network of concentration camps and instructed the U.S. Department of Justice to assemble a list of 2 million people who would be placed in concentration camps if a state of national emergency was declared. I know that sounds crazy. Google it. The Maupin Internal Security Act was a federal law passed 6 years after the Holocaust in the United States that instructed the U.S. Department of Justice to make a list of 6 million subversives, people that were close to the Communist Party and communist-related organizations, and put them in concentration camps if there was a national emergency. This is a fact. And part of the reason that McCarthyism, as it got into full swing, part of the reason McCarthyism scared so many people who weren't communists is because many people saw the Holocaust, and they saw what was done during the Holocaust. They saw the rhetoric that was used to justify the Holocaust and the rise of the Nazis. And they heard the screaming about the Reds and the commies. They're un-American. They should move to another country. They heard that. They heard we need the military everywhere. We need the armed forces everywhere. We need an authoritarian state to fight the commies, to fight the Reds. They heard this stuff. It reminded them of the Holocaust. All right. Bankrolled. Now, after McCarthyism, you had the rise of the New Left. The New Left. The 1960s, really the late 50s, early 60s, the era when Kennedy was in ascendancy. After the death of Stalin, after Joe McCarthy was censured by the U.S. Congress and drank himself to death, you had the rise of more of a liberal viewpoint. And what the New Left and the liberals tried to do really was to try and equate communism and fascism. That was a huge part of what the New Left was all about. The Frankfurt School, Theodor Adorno, Partisan Review magazine, Susan Sontag, Hannah Arendt. This is a huge part of what they were all about. Try to get people to see the Holocaust and fascism and somehow link it to the people who defeated fascism, the Soviet Union and the communists. Say that they're both totalitarian systems. Say that they both believe in truth. Say that they both believe that their cause is just. Say that they both call for strength and glorify strength among their populations. It's a very sinister thing, but that was a big part of what the New Left was about. Instead of trying to build a fascist United States to defeat the communists, which is what McCarthyism was, because that scared too many people, because it reminded people of the Holocaust, the whole concentration camps for communists, the military state, etc. The second understanding of things was to try and equate fascism and communism. That's a huge part of what the New Left was about. The liberals still do this, right? People call me Nazbol and all that, tankies, right? That's what all this is about. an attempt to try and equate the two. And in the 1960s, 70s, even up into the 80s, that's kind of how U.S. society saw the Holocaust. The Holocaust was the result of extremes, right? I heard this even when I was a kid. My parents were more liberal-oriented. I was in a very conservative area. My parents voted for Democrats. And in their mind, you know, communism and fascism are two extremes. You've heard this before. You never get extreme in anything. All extremes are the same. Right? If you become an extreme communist, that makes you just as bad as an extreme fascist. It makes you just as bad as an extreme Christian or an extreme Muslim. You know, you never want to get too extreme in everything, right? You know, you wanna not get extreme in things, because if you do, then it's totalitarian and it all leads to the same thing. Horseshoe theory, etc. That's liberals. That's the 1960s, 70s, 80s. But the 90s, we start to get a much more sinister interpretation of the Holocaust. I started hearing this when I was a kid. That the Holocaust happened because the USA didn't invade Germany. Right? The Holocaust proves we must engage in humanitarian intervention. You've heard this before. I work 12 shifts, 4 or 5 hours a day. Factory, I lift weights, I'm exhausted outside of work, and I have no time for organizing projects. I need better time management. If you have time, use it wisely. I'm sorry to hear that, Zach, and I'm absolutely. Absolutely. Time is valuable, absolutely. But suddenly the Holocaust in the 90s becomes a reason that the USA must invade countries. And this is a very sinister narrative, right? Because we know the United States backed Hitler, had friendly relations with the Nazis. Many political figures in the United States admired the Nazis. Henry Ford. There was a group called the America First Committee that was lobbying very hard to keep the United States from opposing the Nazis. Charles Lindbergh, right? The National Association of Manufacturers. There was Father Coughlin, whose broadcasts in Michigan were paid for by General Motors, and he would give these pro-Nazi, pro-fascist sermons over the radio. There was a huge amount of sympathy for Hitler among the U.S. ruling class. A lot of the factory owners, in particular in the United States, thought, yeah, maybe Hitler's a dictator, maybe he's killing people, but at least he stopped the commies. And that was the attitude among a lot of American capitalists and right-wingers. At least he's killing the commies, right? The Austrian school, right? Ludwig von Mises, he said, hey, at least these fascists are killing commies. They don't have our economic theories, their government's spending money, but at least they're killing commies, right? There's a section of the right wing that is just so sinister, right? But when I was a kid, all of a sudden, 90s, any country the USA was attacking was another Hitler regime. And Hitler was just a dictator. He was just an authoritarian leader. And the USA always hates dictators. The USA always loves democracy and freedom. And look, there was this dictator, and gosh darn it, we didn't invade Germany the second Hitler came to power, so look what happened. So therefore, the Holocaust proves that every time CNN tells us that some government around the world is guilty of some crime, we must support interventionism. That is the narrative. That is the narrative that I got, right? Bill Clinton, Slobodan Milosevic. Hey, look, he's committing a crime. It's an atrocity. The USA bombs Serbia, right? Iraq, the attack on Kuwait, they got the girl crying on there. They're taking babies out of incubators. See? And then Bush says, quote, he's a Hitler. He's a Hitler. Oh, so we got to invade. Right? Saddam Hussein later, the invasion of Iraq. I heard that from my classmates, from my at school. I heard that on television. I heard that from people in my little town. Saddam Hussein is just like Hitler. And look, we didn't invade Nazi Germany right after World War II. or right after Hitler came to power, and look what happened. So we got to invade Iraq right now to stop another Hitler. And that became the way the Holocaust was interpreted. It was a case for humanitarian interventionism. Never mind the fact that Hitler was not an anti-imperialist. Never mind the fact that the American government propped up and supported Hitler. Never mind the fact that basically Hitler was viewed as an anti-communist and a friend of American capitalism. Never mind that IBM designed the punch card machines for the Holocaust. Well, it's all been obscured. Hitler was some anti-American dictator, and the Holocaust is proof that we have to invade countries to stop anti-American dictators. Very scary propaganda. But now that all these wars have happened, Libya, Syria, now that the American public is growing weary of humanitarian interventions, now that the U.S. public doesn't like wars, we're getting yet another narrative. This one is even more disturbing. All non-mainstream ideas are Nazi ideas. I mean, it's disturbing to me. But conspiracy theories, all ideas that go against what the mainstream says are equated with fascist and Nazi ideas. That is beyond me. But it's very scary. Great example, Jabba the Vosh, right? He asked me about China, and I honestly answered that I'm not sure everything we're hearing about the Uyghur stuff is true. You're just like someone who says there is no Holocaust. You know, that's the way you're trained to think. If mainstream media accuses anyone of violating human rights, if you say that you don't buy it, immediately you're linked to the Holocaust. Immediately, right? Anything, right? U.S. media says that Maduro is eating little children for breakfast, and you say, what proof do you have of that? Oh, and I bet the Holocaust didn't happen either, right? It's this whistle response, this whistle response that you have, right? Hey, is there really proof this chemical weapons attack happened in Syria? What? Oh, I bet the gas didn't happen in Auschwitz either, right? They've got this trained response. And it's interesting how it works, right? They talk about brainwashing, trauma, neurolinguistic programming, all of that, right? If you anchor someone's mind to go in a certain place, right? Pavlov rings the bell and feeds the dog, and so he rings the bell and the dog salivates even though there's no food. You make that association in people's minds. They have trained people in the United States that if any allegation is leveled against a country the United States doesn't like, if you go, hey, what about, you're a Nazi, you're a Holocaust denier. Scary. Terrifying. Right? Absolutely terrifying. How many times has the U.S. media lied about atrocities being committed in other countries? But they're trained people. They've got this hypnotic training that we all have, that if you question any allegation of human rights violations by U.S. media, you're the same as people who say there's no Holocaust. That is unbelievable. Another thing that they do. This is crazy. Right? All conspiracy theories are anti-Semitic. Have you heard this one? This is a new one, but this is what they say. All conspiracy theories are anti-Semitic. Right? John F. Kennedy was killed. He was the president of the United States. He was shot, and the man who was arrested for shooting him was shot right after getting arrested by a man who had brain cancer. That's a pretty suspicious event. That's pretty darn suspicious. But apparently, according to the memo that's now been sent out by mainstream media, if you think anything other than the official story, somehow that means you hate Jews and you're the same as the people who carried out the Holocaust. How? I have no clue. I do not know how thinking that maybe there might be a wider conspiracy to kill John F. Kennedy somehow translates to you're the same as the people who carried out the Holocaust. I have no idea how that works. But mainstream media has trotted out a number of articles explaining that that all conspiracy theories are anti-Semitic. And keep in mind, anything that you don't agree with is a conspiracy theory. That's a little bit disturbing. And then, and you can Google this, right? It sounds a little bit too horrific to be true. Sounds a little bit too horrific to be true. Jonah Goldberg, who was at one point the editor of National Review magazine, wrote an article called Karl Marx's Jew-hating conspiracy theory, claiming that all anti-capitalism is anti-Semitic. Even though Marx was Jewish, even though anti-Semites regularly claim Marxism is a Jewish conspiracy, even though there have been millions and millions and millions of Jewish people who believe in Marxism, nope. Marxism and criticism of capitalism is anti-Semitic, according to Jonah Goldberg. Why? Because rich is code for Jew. Seriously. Seriously, you're not allowed to criticize capitalism because Jonah Goldberg says that rich is code for Jew. But there are plenty of working class Jewish people. There are plenty of but I don't know how this works, but Jonah Goldberg has said that Karl Marx was an anti-Semite and that all criticism of capitalism is anti-Semitism. That is beyond me. It's beyond me, and it's horrifying. So, when mainstream media accuses a country of committing atrocities, you're not allowed to question it because then somehow that makes you the same as people who say there's no Holocaust. You're not allowed to believe that what mainstream media tells us about any given situation is not true because that is a conspiracy theory, and all conspiracy theories somehow or other get back to anti-Semitism and make you the same as the people who carried out the Holocaust. And now, according to Jonah Goldberg, all criticism of capitalism is simply coded anti-Semitism. So if you criticize capitalism, you're the same as the Nazis who killed millions of people who criticized capitalism. I mean, meanwhile, in Ukraine, the U.S.-aligned forces are tearing down World War II memorials. Meanwhile, in Russia, an open ethno-nationalist who hangs out with neo-Nazis named Alexei Navalny is being supported by the United States and being held up as this glorious human rights fighter in U.S. media. Meanwhile, the U.S.-aligned right wing of Japan is trying to rewrite history books in Japan to try and cover up the horrendous atrocities the Japanese fascists and their alliance with the Nazis committed. Meanwhile, in Latin America, open admirers of Hitler and the Nazis are among U.S. forces that are trying to overthrow Maduro and overthrow the socialists in Bolivia, etc. This is how insane everything has gotten. But at the end of the day, the horrendous crime known as the Holocaust was the result of capitalism in decay. It was the result of the fact that the capitalist system was in a complete economic and political crisis in the 1930s, and one section of the German ruling class seized power and used their power to murder millions of people, to destroy the labor movement, and to ultimately build a fascist state that created a new world war. And American corporations were in bed with him. And the American government thought he was potentially a good ally against the communists. If it hadn't been for Roosevelt and the Popular Front and the anti-fascist efforts of communists all over the world, in Britain and the United States, there's a good chance the USA might not have been on the right side of World War II. So it's certainly disturbing to think about the fact that such a horrendous event like the Holocaust happened. But now, the capitalists still can't question their system. And they still do everything they can to try and somehow reinterpret history to justify their crimes. It's very, very disturbing. So I just felt like saying that as we remember the horrendous event known as the Holocaust and what happened. So, on that note, folks, I think we're going to do our any recommendations on the reading of the history of the American Communist Movement. All right, we're going to do our roll call. So I'll call you out as I see you, names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Who is with us? Australia, Oz Whistles over there. Dylan Small. Live chat. There we go. Fairhope, Alabama. Montreal. Never Again Nazis. Mo in Toronto, Canada. Belize, Joey. West Palm Beach, Bulgaria. Israel, Illinois, Brian Schaefer. Very good. St. Louis, Missouri. Henderson, Nevada. Glasgow, Scotland. Boston. Karachi, Pakistan, Wisconsin, Denver, Colorado, Missouri, Croatia, Mississippi State, France, the Netherlands, International, Knoxville, Tennessee, Bayonne, New Jersey, Treasure Coast, Florida, Captain Waffles, Australia, Kieran from San Diego, Alberta, Canada, Juan from Mexico, Washington State, Andre in Tallahassee, Balthazar in Oakland, New York City, Heavy Dukes, New Jersey, Peter in Manchester, Frankfurt, Germany, eating Italian food in the Factory of Ideas, John in Houston, Tanky in Terre Haute, Indiana, Heathrow, Toronto, Canada, Bendigo, Australia, David Fox, Jacob Maxey from Lafayette, Louisiana, Sham, Cleveland, Wasteland, Seattle, Rapid City, South Dakota, Glendale, California, Corona, California, Space Communist, Pomona, California, Cleveland Pirate Alex, welcome, 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 welcome. Earth, Don from Sonora, Mexico, Pasadena, California, Leipzig, East Germany. Respect Caleb, says Nicholas Lynch. Very good. Very, very good. Heart of Darkness, says Richard. Julian from Southeast United Kingdom. Long Island, New York, says Socialist Billionaire. Welcome, 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 welcome. Folks, I wanted to make sure that it's got Shaw from Maryland, Nate from Sydney, Australia, Kendall in San Diego, Edinburgh. Very good. Folks, I wanted to let folks know that on Sunday, it looks like on Sunday I'm going to be joining George Galloway on his show. But after that, later in the afternoon, it's evening in the UK, but it's like afternoon over here. Later in the afternoon, I'm going to do a stream for patrons only. It'll be the second patrons-only stream we've done this month. I'm going to end the month with a patrons-only stream. So that's going to be good. So if you are a patron, be sure to be available on Sunday afternoon so you can join the patrons-only stream. And if you want to sign up, now is the time. The link is below. Become a patron today, and you can join on Sunday's stream. It'll be a lot of fun. It'll be a lot of fun. So you know, if you're available Sunday, and if you're not already a patron, sign up. If you are, looking forward to it. It'll be fun. The patrons-only streams are very relaxed. They're very relaxed streams. We just kind of relax, we chill. I just answer your questions. I don't come with anything prepared, and I just answer your questions 1 hour, 2 hours sometimes. And it's just kind of relaxed. I'm a little more upfront about things. There are certain things I don't talk about on these lives, but I will talk about on patrons-only streams. So if you want to be a patron, tune in, and it should be fun. So, should be good. Folks, we're going to get into the super chats now. So be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. If you haven't already done so, do all of those things. Tweet this out. Share this. Don't miss the web conference tomorrow. And now I am going to go through these super chat questions that folks have sent in. So, are we ready? All right. First super chat question. Why does China not build up the DPRK the way the USA built up South Korea? For the very simple reason that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has withdrawn from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Right? China and Russia and many countries, around the world, feel that it is very important that the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty stay intact. If there is no Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the USA could start giving nuclear weapons to all of its allies, and there could be a new global arms race, and that would be very bad for all of humanity. It would be particularly bad for Russia and China because they would have to spend lots of money on building nukes to keep up with the United States, and we don't want a new global nuclear arms race. North Korea withdrew from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. So as a result, Russia and China, that are both members of the UN Security Council, have supported economic sanctions against North Korea because they feel it is very important that the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty remain intact. And that is why China and Russia cannot invest heavily into North Korea the same way the United States has invested heavily into South Korea. During the Soviet period, there was a huge amount of investment into North Korea, but now that we're in a period where North Korea has withdrawn from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, it would be very difficult, right? And now many people argue, many supporters of North Korea will argue they had the right to withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, that the Non-Proliferation Treaty allows people to withdraw from it. Now, I'm not an expert. I don't know the language of the treaty well enough to know if that's actually accurate. Some other people, if you look at the situation, the reason that North Korea developed nuclear weapons, it fits in with, the USA trying to overthrow them, the USA creating a food crisis in North Korea and starving millions of their people during the 1990s. And as a result of that, North Korea becoming in a very, very dangerous situation, facing, a possible invasion. Would it be better if the terminology was started as the woke right? All right. Right. That is the reason, ultimately, that China and Russia, whatever economic activity they do with North Korea, is very limited. It's because of that. So that's really the reason. I'm just giving you a factual answer. It's very important to Russia and China that the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty remain intact. North Korea withdrew from it, so Russia and China are not going to be able to just pour lots of money in there because that would be, as the UN, they've supported sanctions against North Korea for pulling out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. All right, was Rousseau a pre-Marxist? I would argue that he was not. I believe Rousseau had this whole notion of noble savages, and he justified the past. He kind of glorified primitivism, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau was very much a thinker of the bourgeois revolution. He did have some utopian thinking, but I don't see Jean-Jacques Rousseau as pre-Marxist. He was a French revolutionary, right? He was associated with the French Revolution. His ideas certainly influenced the French Revolution, so you can argue he had some impact. But I don't see a strand of Marxist thinking continuing. I don't see it. All right. Carl Schmitt and his influence in China. I have no idea about what the Nazi legal theoretician Carl Schmitt and his influence in China. I really have no idea about that. All right. Gus Hall's article on petty bourgeois radicalism. The Marxist Internet Archive has recently been publishing the writings of Gus Hall. but it's very limited. They can only publish a few of Gus Hall's writings. I understand there's some negotiation going on with International Publishers, which is the publishing company of the Communist Party, and that there is a negotiation going on about what of Gus Hall's writings are in the public domain and can be published, and what the copyright will be prevented about. And I really hope that more of Gus Hall's writings are available on the internet, because Gus Hall was a very important American communist leader who made a great contribution to the class struggle. It says China assassinated Gaddafi. China assisted in the assassination of Gaddafi. I've never heard anything about that. I really doubt that. But anyway, my hope is that more of Gus Hall's writings would be available. As far as his article on petty bourgeois radicalism, it's a good article. I recommend people go read it. I don't agree with everything in there necessarily. He points to petty bourgeois radicalism. He critiques in particular Students for a Democratic Society and how the organization emerged as kind of an anti-communist liberal activist group, and then how it kind of degenerated and collapsed. And it's interesting, and I think a lot of what he observes about petty bourgeois radicalism in the 1960s New Left being a product of despair and frustration, some of the left adventurous tendencies, I think it's very correct. One thing that he says about the Progressive Labor Party, I don't know if that is accurate. He talks about Progressive Labor, which was one of the Maoist groups in the United States, and he says they were formed by a group of people that kind of panicked during the McCarthy period or something. I've never heard that. And sometimes in Gus Hall, there's a lot of old pamphlets by Gus Hall. Sometimes you'll get little anecdotes in pamphlets from Gus Hall that are hard to verify, I will say. Like that anecdote in that petty bourgeois radicalism essay, I don't know, I've never heard that about the Progressive Labor Party, that they originated as a group of people who panicked during McCarthyism or something. I never heard that before. I'm not saying it's not true. I mean, I wasn't in Progressive Labor Party and I wasn't in the Communist Party in the 1950s, so I don't know. But my understanding is the Progressive Labor Party was formed by a guy named Milton Rosen. And Milton Rosen was an auto worker in Buffalo, or he was a steel worker in Buffalo, New York, and later became a college professor, and he started the Progressive Labor Party, and they were kind of Maoists. And I never did I hear that they were the Progressive Labor Party was formed by people who panicked during McCarthyism. But that could be true. I mean, you don't know. You don't know. I mean, and there's a couple little anecdotes in that essay that I don't quite I can't verify. But as far as the overall thrust of that piece, critiquing 1960s radicalism as a product of despair and left adventurism, I think it's a good piece. Why did China and Russia not use their veto power to prevent the attack on Libya in 2011? We'll talk about that. Libya. Why? No veto. Okay. Alrighty. Evangelicals converting to being traditionalist Catholics. Well, traditionalist Catholicism, that is Roman Catholics who reject Vatican II, right? In the early 1960s, there were, they had a gathering of, Roman Catholic clergy, and they wrote some new documents, and the Catholic Church really changed a lot of its beliefs, about all kinds of things. The Roman Catholic Church accepted, I believe that they accepted at that point Darwin's theory of evolution. They all kinds of things the Catholic Church had believed for many thousands of years, they stopped believing. One of the things they did is that the Catholic Mass was no longer given in Latin. It was given in the native language. That changed because of Vatican II. Vatican II was a big change globally. The Catholic Church completely changed the way it operated. So the folks they call traditionalist Catholics, that refers to Roman Catholics who think that Vatican II was the Vatican, the Pope, selling out Catholicism. They want to go back to Catholicism before Vatican II. Mel Gibson is a traditionalist Catholic, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, I think Pat Buchanan is a traditionalist Catholic. One of the thinkers associated with traditionalist Catholicism is actually someone that I met when I was in Iran. I mean, I don't, this isn't somebody I agree with by any means. His views are far different than mine. Let me make that clear. But I would go to these international conferences in Iran, and they invite all kinds of people. And there's a very conservative traditionalist Catholic thinker named E. Michael Jones, who's written many books, and I met E. Michael Jones in Iran, and a lot of times I was in the same delegation as they would take us around different parts of Iran. So I met E. Michael Jones. I don't know him on an intimate level or anything, but we sat in the same car and we were in Iran together on a few different occasions, and he's certainly anti-Semitic and has said things about Jewish people that are horrendous, he's considered to be one of the most foremost traditionalist Catholic thinkers. For someone on the right, he is critical of capitalism, which is interesting. He brings forth that old Roman Catholic critique of capitalism. But I don't think there are mass conversions to traditionalist Catholicism happening among evangelicals. I think that traditionalist Catholicism is popular among the alt-right. People on the internet that were with Richard Spencer and were into the white supremacy stuff, this is kind of the next evolution, right? Look, many people have talked about the pipeline of the alt-right, right? That a lot of them were people from evangelical conservative families who, through the internet, became part of the new atheist movement. They became followers of Richard Dawkins. They discovered that the religious views of their families they grew up with were deeply irrational, and they became followers of Richard Dawkins. And then after they became followers of Richard Dawkins, they decided they were smart about economics, so they became libertarians. The libertarians have this whole, we understand economics, and the left doesn't emphasize economics. Let's remember, the organized left just talks about feelings and emotions, and you're a big fat racist. So a lot of these young white men who grew up as evangelicals became new atheists, moved toward becoming libertarians. Libertarianism then kind of slips into some white supremacist thoughts. And now it seems like a lot of the white supremacist folks, they are already anti-Semitic. It seems like a lot of them, they've kind of seen the Richard Spencer stuff failing. And so now some of them are becoming traditionalist Roman Catholics. They see that as kind of a smarter way to be religious. It has some of the anti-Semitism that they like, and it has a critique, and it's critical of capitalism in a way, in some ways that some elements of the alt-right were. So, and that seems to be a trend among the alt-right. There are various leaps and evolutions, right? I mean, they almost try a new ideology every week. It's a movement of very, very confused people. What's interesting is that, I will say this, that, during the 1960s in the United States, the right wing were stupid, and the left wing were supposed to be these crazy, pointy-headed intellectuals with these wild ideas. Right? That's been the stereotype my whole life, right? The right wing are like, if you don't like it here, why don't you move to another country, you un-American patriot? I don't know nothing, but I like capitalism and I like America, and you should go somewhere else, right? The right wing are supposed to be this like know-nothing, ignorant, etc. Whereas the left wing are supposed to be like, well, according to Noam Chomsky's latest paper, the Vietnam War is an extreme existential problem created by the, it's like the left wing, we're all supposed to be these pointy-headed intellectuals. Well, according to Greek mythology, the Vietnam War violates the principles of the goddess Apollo in the ceremony conducted by E equals MC squared in mathematics, right? I mean, that's the dynamic, right? It's supposed to be these dumb rednecks or right wing, right? You should move to another country. You don't like the Vietnam War. Get out of here, white man. Or get out of here. I'm racist. I'm right wing. I like the war in Vietnam. Kill them Vietnamese. Woo! Right? That's the right wing. And the left wing are supposed to be, well, the Vietnam War is a violation of the basic principles of Greek philosophy in the 1700s. And right, that's the stereotype. Right? What's interesting is it's kind of flipped. Right? Now it's the left wing. It's like, what? You're not going to vote for Biden? You're a racist. Shut up, racist. I read on the internet that you're a racist. Wow. I mean, the left wing are just people going, you're a racist. You're a sexist. You're stupid. And they're just like ignorant. Whereas these people on the right are like, well, I just read based on the writings of Julius Evola in the 1700s and the theories of Oswald Spengler, if you reinterpret the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey to be actually about the writings of the ancient Ethiopians and their traditional rituals about Satanism, and it's like, it's weird. It's like the alt-right are like these like weird crypto intellectuals who are sitting there analyzing Greek mythology and having obscure notions about economics and digging up like obscure right-wing thinkers from like the year 400, and whereas the left are just, it's just these like, shut up! If you don't agree with me, shut up! You're a fascist and you need to be silent. It's weird. It's weird. We seem like a whole flip where it's like the know-nothing, if you don't agree with me, you need to be silenced, and we're not interested in facts and books and all of that. That is the left-wing attitude now. And it's the right wing that have gotten into this weird over-intellectualization of everything. It's weird. It's very, very weird, and it scares me, honestly. I'm on the left. I've always been on the left, right? I mean, my parents were Democrats when I was a kid. I got interested in communism. I've always been on the left. But I've always been a very bookish guy, and it scares me, because I wonder, if I were young now, if I were young in this time, if I were a young kid and I was bookish and all that, and I saw the way the left acted now, would I go to the right? And that scares me. It worries me that a young, smart person who wants to know how the world works, if the left has this anti-intellectualism and this intolerance and this thought-stopping rituals where you're not allowed to think certain things, you're not allowed to criticize capitalism, that's anti-Semitic. You're not allowed to oppose wars, or you're not allowed to question Russiagate because that makes you a Trumper, right? This is scary, right? Because now, there's a lot of people that are very intelligent that are interested in, world events and theories and stuff. And it seems like the right is where if you're a young person who's, intellectual, it seems like the right is a far more comfortable place to be. That said, though, the other factor is the information revolution, right? Look, nowadays in our time, information is much more accessible than it used to be. And there's a lot of people from all political persuasions who are just on the internet thinking about politics all the time. So, whatever. Whatever. And there's still plenty of dumb people on the right. Let's not pretend that there aren't dumb people on the right, because there are plenty of dumb people on the right. I saw the super chat about QAnon. I don't think QAnon is an alt-right thing. I think QAnon is more like regular Trump supporter kind of people who get into the conspiracy milieu. I don't think it's linked to the alt-right. The alt-right is a different formation. The alt-right is obsessed with race. Those are people that talk about race, right? Whereas most of the Trump movement was never explicitly talking about race and white supremacism, etc. So I don't think that QAnon is like Trump supporters getting conspiratorial, but the alt-right is a separate thing. The alt-right is people that were like, I am white and I am obsessed with the white man, and that's a totally different phenomenon. But yeah, I don't think there's mass conversions to traditionalist Catholicism going on. I think that the alt-right, that's like their latest thing. So, and it's always been around. The traditional Catholicism has always been around in the United States, right? There's always been anti-Semitic, right-wing Catholic subgroups in the United States. They've been around a long time. Michael Jones, like I mentioned, he's not a young man. Not a young man. He's been writing books for years, so I don't think that's accurate. Why is dialectics important to understand? Because it lays the basis for Marxism, right? Marxism, before it was an economic theory, before it was a political theory, it was a philosophical theory. Marx started out his intellectual work as a left Hegelian. So understanding dialectical materialism and how the world works, and that understanding of the nature of reality is very important, I think. And again, even if you don't agree with me, this was my argument in college. I said we should read Lenin's book State and Revolution in college. And they asked me why. Because at one point, 2/3 of humanity lived under governments based on that book. Even if you disagree with it, you should know what Lenin had to say about the state and the government. Well, even if you disagree with it, you should know dialectical materialism. You should know what it is, because it had a huge impact, right? The 20th century. Yeah, alrighty. people think Marxism is higher taxes. Why is this the case? This is because European social democratic parties, while on paper they advocate overturning capitalism, they say they want to create a society where the workers control the means of production. Overall, European social democratic parties have enacted welfare state reforms. And because of that, people associate with welfare state reforms with a higher tax rate. And so people think Marxism, we've heard this before. Marxism is the government giving people free stuff. No, that happens under every system. The government spends money under every system. The government gives us free roads and free mail, and come on, right? But people who think Marxism is the government gives people stuff, well, obviously you have to pay for that somehow, so then they think Marxism is higher taxes. They have no understanding of what Marxism is. It's just, liberals are all Marxists. Did you know that? Right? Anyone who's not a Republican and doesn't believe in total unregulated neoliberal free market capitalism is a Marxist. Did you know that? Haven't you listened to Dinesh D'Souza? I mean, I'm just kidding. But, it's this conservative Republican trope that everyone who is not an advocate of unregulated free market capitalism is therefore a communist. So, therefore, because liberals want more social programs and you have to pay for those social programs some way, that means Marxism is higher taxes. That's what that delusion is based on. It's obnoxious. It's really, really annoying. And what's even more annoying about it is the organized left doesn't counter it. It just shouts, "Shut up, racist!" It's like, Marxism makes your taxes go up. Yeah, well, you're a big racist. And it's like, how does that make him racist? I mean, now you could explain that, like, the welfare trope is racist, which it is, right? The welfare trope is racist, right? The welfare mother, is a racist stereotype. The idea that only black people get welfare is a very common racist trope. Right? So there are ways that you could explain to somebody that this notion that Marxism makes your taxes go up has roots in a racist idea. But if you just shout, "You're racist," if you just do that, you haven't accomplished anything. Right? So, I don't know. Anyway, I'm all for, like, explaining our beliefs so that people can change their backward beliefs and maybe adopt our beliefs. That's always been my approach to things. When people have backward ideas, the idea is to show how those backward ideas are wrong, and then get people to change their ideas. But nowadays, you're not supposed to do that. You're just supposed to be a liberal. You're not supposed to understand why you're a liberal. You're not supposed to understand why you're a liberal. You're just supposed to be a liberal because it's the hip, cool thing to do, and then you're supposed to scream racist at everyone who's not a liberal, and that's the answer, and that's why we are completely screwed. Sorry, I hate to be negative. I think that we're actually doing a very good thing here. I don't think we're completely screwed. I think very good things are happening, but it's an uphill battle. There's a lot of gatekeepers on the left who try to control left-wing dialogue, but look, we're filling a void here. Many people are hungry for what we're doing on these lives. All right. Gamestop uniting different ideologies. Anti-Wall Street populism is pretty widespread. A lot of libertarians hate Wall Street. A lot of right-wingers hate. Yes and no. Look, it's the rules are rigged for a certain group of people, and we all know that. And there's a lot of Wall Street speculators who make money out of nothing. We all know that. But the question is, how do you interpret it? So, is it uniting people of different ideologies? Not exactly. It's something it's a critique of our existing society that people of many different viewpoints can agree on. All right. Someone said they got a COVID vaccine. Yeah, well, hey, I'm not against the vaccine at all. I would like to get vaccinated. I'm young, though, they're giving priority to healthcare workers and then elderly people and such, but, I'm not against the vaccine. I wish it was being handled better. I'm a little bit worried about how it's being handled, but Biden's only been in there 2 weeks now, so whatever. There you go. Silicon Valley, right? What about Silicon Valley? Well, Silicon Valley is it's California, I guess, and it's Apple is based there. A lot of different computer corporations are based in California. Shouldn't say Southern California because that's Los Angeles. I should say California, right? Like San Francisco area, Palo Alto, places like that. That's where you have Google. That's where you have a lot of the tech giants. The tech monopolies tend to be based in California. And I'm working on a short pamphlet about the ideology of Silicon Valley. So there you go. All right. Biden's executive decisions. I mean, he's making a lot of them, but he did promise he was going to turn things around, right? That's what Biden promised to do. He was going to turn things around so fast, right? He was going to get in there and save the day. Well, I'm waiting for the day to be saved because it doesn't look too good right now. I mean, COVID and the economy, but hey, I mean, he promised he was going to come in there and swing into action and get things done. I mean, he's certainly doing a lot of executive orders. Is he getting stuff done? Well, I haven't really seen things improve, but, there you go. The Katyń massacre. That was a massacre at Katyń Forest. A number of Polish government officials were killed at Katyń Forest. At the end of the Second World War, the Nazis, were convicted of doing it at Nuremberg and executed for it. However, it has been blamed on the Soviet Union. In Russia, the position of the Russian government is that the Soviet Union was responsible for it. I'm not an expert on Katyń massacre, not an expert on it, I would encourage you to look at the work of people who've actually studied it. It seems like the position of many people in Russia is that the Soviet Union actually did it, but the position of many people in Russia is also, there are many people in Russia who don't think the Russian government did it. There are many people who think that the Nazis who were convicted of doing it at Nuremberg were actually guilty of doing it. It is a big point in anti-Russian Polish sentiment, so I don't know enough about it, okay? I just don't know enough about it. There are some people who say the Nazis actually did it. There are some people who say that Stalin did it. The Stalin did it viewpoint seems to be the prevailing viewpoint around the world. Does that mean it's necessarily true? I know it was a horrendous massacre. A number of Polish government officials were rounded up and killed. It was horrendous. The prevailing viewpoint is that the Soviet Union was responsible, but not everyone necessarily buys that, and there's debate, and I'm not a historian. It's an awful event, and the Polish people have the right to be angry about it. If the Soviet Union did it, that's horrible. If the Nazis did it, it's also horrible. I'm not a big fan of massacres. And like I said, the prevailing viewpoint among most historians is that the Soviet Union did it. That is the prevailing viewpoint. But there are some people who maintain that that's not true. Are you familiar with the YouTuber's second thought? Son, his visit to the DHS for a video, the CIA is a terrorist organization. He was investigated for anti-American sentiment. I am not familiar with that, Atari. I'm not familiar with that. Why doesn't the left raise up charges regarding business profiteering off the pandemic? All right. Are people getting surveilled because they make videos? Of course. And do you think we're not being surveilled? Do you think that you think that the government isn't paying attention to these videos? I would think that they are, but, I could be wrong, right? Big business. All right, we're just getting through these super chats here. All right, what's going on in India? How do we bring intellectualism back to the left? Bring intellectualism back to the left. All right. In India, there's an uprising of the farmers going on. They had a program in India to subsidize farmers by having them sell their produce to the government, and then the government would sell it to Monsanto. But now the government of Modi in India is rolling that back, and it's threatening to crush a lot of Indian farmers. And so there's been an uprising among the farmers. The trade unions are involved. There are millions of people that are rising up against the neoliberal reforms of Modi. The trade union movement of India is in revolt, and the people of India are mobilizing against this neoliberal austerity that Modi is pushing. That's what's happening in India. What did I do with the insurance company, and did you like it? You know what? The person who asked this question, I'm just going to tell you straight up, all right? I'm not going to tell you the name of the insurance company I worked at. I'm not going to tell you what I did there. And I'm not going to tell you who I worked with, because you don't do that. All right? I'm just be real. You don't do that. You don't do that. I have a rule on here. People have asked me about other people who work at the company I work at. I don't talk about it. I don't do that. You don't do that. Okay? Right? I might here or there make reference to my family. I might tell an old anecdote about a friend, but I usually leave their names out. You don't do that. You don't do that, right? It's not cool. How would you like it if one of your coworkers got on here and started spewing all kinds of information? And when I used to work at the office with Joe Bob, I'm not going to do that, all right? If you want to dig and, people, and I assume, I've been basically doxxed. It's not a secret. People can find all kinds of information on me. If people want to dig up information on me, that's fine. But, there's a level of privacy. Right? I have the right, I have my freedom of speech. I could get on here and tell you everything that ever happened at the insurance company I used to work at. I could tell you exactly what I did. I could tell you the names of my coworkers and how stupid I thought they were, or how smart I thought they were, or I could tell you all kinds of things. And I might share an anecdote from the insurance company, but that's not what I'm on here to do, right? I'm not on here to get into great detail about people's personal lives, and that you shouldn't do that, right? You really shouldn't do that. It's not a nice thing to do. It's really not a nice thing to do, Look, I work at a company, right? Obviously, the company I work at now, there are personalities who work here, and some of them I get along with, and some of them I don't. I don't talk about that on here. There's office drama. Every office I have ever worked in has had office drama. There is nothing new about office drama. There is always office drama. The conference is tomorrow night, right? The web conference is tomorrow night. But I don't get into that. I really don't, right? I feel like I was a good employee when I was at the insurance company. I feel like, even though it's not the job I would prefer to do again, I learned a lot while I was there. I feel like I had some skills that were particularly useful. I also feel like it was very educational for me, culturally, to work at the insurance company I worked at. I am from the Midwest and not from Brooklyn. And so to work at a company that was, very culturally, politically different than what I grew up with was very educational, and I learned a lot. I learned some things that I was good at and some things I was not so good at. And actually, it's funny, I was even considering getting my license to sell insurance at some point, right? Because I saw what the insurance, producers, the licensed insurance salespeople did, and I thought, I could do that. But then, my life took another direction. Occupy Wall Street happened, and I ended up, doing some full-time organizing. But, I don't regret working at the insurance company. My job was very menial. It was wasn't a high-level job. It was an entry-level position. But, at the time, it was the most money I'd ever made, right? I had been in Ohio, and I'd worked at gas stations. And I had worked in fast food, and I had worked at cleaning dorm rooms for a college, and I had worked at a recreational center, mopping floors, doing maintenance work, and even though the pay was very low, it was the most pay I'd ever made. I remember I started out there, I made $10 an hour when I started out there. And after I'd been there for a few months, they bumped my pay up to $12.80 an hour. And when they did that, it was like Christmas for me. I had never made $12.80 an hour. And when I told older folks what I was making, they said, that is a crime. And for me, I thought that was a lot of money. And and it was an office job. And compared to some of the other jobs I'd had, it was far less demanding. I came in, I went to my desk every day, I took care of all the tasks, and they were always kind of blown away at how hard I worked, I'll tell you that much, right? There were a lot of people at that insurance company who didn't work anywhere near as hard as I did, and they said, how do you work so hard? Well, I had been at all these other jobs that had me going, and so I'd be at my desk, and I would do the job, they were always blown away at how hard I was working, that's what I'll tell you about when I worked at the insurance company, but at the time, when they bumped up my wage to $12.80 an hour, I thought, I'm rich. I had never made anywhere near that much money at any other job in my life. I went to college, when they gave me $12.80 an hour, I thought I was, oh boy, another super chat. Okay, what did I miss? What did I miss? What did I miss? Going up. Did I miss it? Did I miss it? I'm going way up here. In 2011, 2012 archaeological dig by the Poles, Ukrainian provided the Nazis with the, okay, all right, okay, thank you. I can't verify that super chat, but I see it, and I'm not gonna, I don't take sides here on that thing. I'm not an expert on Katyń. But yeah, I mean, like I said, you don't do that, okay? I'm not gonna get on here and tell you about my coworkers. I'm not gonna tell you the name of the insurance company. I'm not gonna tell you what I did at the insurance company, because it's not important, okay? You gotta respect people's privacy on some level. If people want to dig into my personal life, they can. I mean, it's not that hard to figure out who I am. I actually find people posting about me ever since like Thought Slime and, Skippy the Bear and Jabba the Vosh, and ever since, these people with a bigger audience have like gone after me, every so often I'll find a tweet by somebody who thinks they know me or thinks they remember me from like college or someplace I worked or something. And it's funny because I've noticed that they don't exactly remember me. They'll often have me confused with like somebody else, and they'll like half remember me, and I think that's amusing. And I'll read those tweets, and it's always amusing because it's like, and the person will be like, "Oh, I remember him. He used to live blank, and he used to do blank," and it'll be about half right usually. That's interesting. You have to remember that people don't remember other people, right? I mean, how many people go in and out of your life that you don't think about? But, ever since, I've been kind of subject to this harassment campaign, there's been people that suddenly remember me, but they don't always get it right. They often, will combine me with, somebody else. And that's kind of amusing to me, actually. But it's kind of scary, too, because, I mean, they could remember me, I think there's been people who confused me with my old roommate because we both had red hair. There's been people who confused me with somebody else that was in a class who was kind of a leftist on my campus. And there's been people who confused me with somebody else who used to work at the insurance company. And there's been people who confused me with somebody, and it's kind of scary because, people could, in theory, remember something that this other person did and remember me as having done it. And if it was something bad, then this person might walk around believing that I did something bad. That's a little bit disturbing, isn't it? But anyway, whatever. I gave way too much of an answer to that question, but it's worth thinking about. I mean, last example, right? I mean, there are these people on the internet who continue to claim that my father was a Wall Street banker. I'm sorry, I'm not from New York. I moved here in 2010. Right? My father was definitely not a Wall Street banker. And that is hilarious to me because if these people were to look up who my father actually was or is and what he did for a living, they would be completely underwhelmed. And I'm not even going to say more about it because I find it hilarious. And again, it's not that hard to figure out who I mean, unfortunately, nowadays, none of us really have a private life. You know that, right? I mean, nowadays, your whole life is there, right? So at the end of the day, I mean, I'm an open book. If you want to really learn all about me, you can do it. I can't stop you, right? I'm not sure I want you necessarily to go through my life, but I really can't do much about it, and I don't lose any sleep over it. That's all there is to it. And I'm an open book, and, I mean, yeah. But again, I'm not going to answer in-depth questions about what I did when I worked at the insurance company because that wouldn't be fair to the people I worked with. Do you know what I'm saying? TMI. That's a good way of putting it, Joey from Belize. TMI. Yeah, you don't do that. You don't do that. Okay. The crisis of overproduction and the boom-bust cycle is a result of the capitalist market, says David Fox. And he's right? This is the built-in mechanism. The third section of Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific is really important. It basically summarizes this. The Nazis were bankrolled by Western capitalists, points out Red Illuminati, and he's absolutely right about that. And I talked about that. I talked about it, and It's, again, it's glossed over. You would think Hitler was a raving anti-imperialist. This Robin Hood app that was involved in the whole GameStop thing, it was claiming that Hitler was a socialist, right? And that they've tried to ignore that some of the biggest capitalists were doing business with Hitler. I mean, they've written it out of history. All right. Good books on the history of the communist movement in the United States. Great question. There's a number of very good books. Communist American history has been my particular obsession for many years, so we'll go down the line. I could go on about this all day, but I'm just going to name a few. All right, one good book is called The History of the Communist Party of the United States by William Z. Foster. Very good book. It's the official Communist Party USA textbook on the history of the Communist Party from like the time of, the American Civil War all the way up until, the 1950s and McCarthyism. Very good. Another very good book is Labor's Untold Story. And it's a history of the U.S. labor movement from a communist perspective. And it's amazing. It is beautifully written, and it tells the whole history of the American labor movement. It's beautiful. If you can get your hands on Labor's Untold Story, that is one of the best books. It brought me to tears on multiple occasions. There were parts of it that gave me chills. It is the most beautiful history books I have ever read. Labor's Untold Story. It's published by the United Electrical Workers Union. It's written by two Communist Party members, and they give the entire history of the American labor movement. Beautiful book. Beautiful book. I've read from it on lives before. It is an amazing, amazing book. Another good book on the history of the American communist movement. I do recommend, Mumia Abu-Jamal wrote a history of the Black Panthers. It's called We Want Freedom, A Life in the Black Panther Party by Mumia Abu-Jamal. Great book. It is one of the best histories of the Black Panthers I've ever read. Very inclusive. And he starts chapters with his own reflections of when he was a teenage Black Panther, and then he does very scholarly research on the history of the Black Panthers from the perspective of women, from the perspective of Malcolm X, and Malcolm X's influence on them. I mean, amazing. Another good book, The Teamster Rebellion, the Teamster series. Now, Farrell Dobbs was a Trotskyite, and the Trotskyites, the one good thing Trotskyism has ever done in the United States. I mean, I can't think of anything other than this. The Trotskyites built the Teamsters, right? The Teamsters Union, the truck drivers union in the United States, was built by Trotskyites. Okay? They haven't really done any other good things in American history that I can think of. But they did build the Teamsters Union. And the leader of the Socialist Workers' Party, who was the organizer of the Teamsters Union, Farrell Dobbs, he wrote a 4-part book series on the history of the Teamsters Union and how the communists, the Trotskyites built it. And it's very good. It's Teamster Rebellion, Teamster Power, Teamster Bureaucracy, Teamster, it's a Teamster Politics. 4 books on the history of how the Trotskyites built the Teamsters Union. It's amazing. It is amazing history. It's amazing history. As much as I don't like Trotskyism, they did build the Teamsters Union, and Jimmy Hoffa, the Teamsters Union, even still today, it's a mighty, powerful labor organization. And that 4-part book series on the history of how the Trotskyites built the Teamsters Union is good. You do have to brace for, there's a lot of anti-communism, anti-Soviet stuff in there, a lot of endless rants and raves against the Communist Party. But if you can read the actual labor history about how the truck drivers and the meat packers of the United States got organized, it's amazing history. Another good book, great book, is called Detroit, I Do Mind Dying. It's a strange title, Detroit, I Do Mind Dying. And that is a history of the new communist movement in Detroit, of the Maoists of Detroit, and their impact on Detroit as a city. And it is fascinating. Detroit, I Do Mind Dying. It talks about the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. It talks about the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement. I bet you don't know that there was a group of black communist auto workers who started their own faction of the United Auto Workers in Detroit. The Dodge Revolutionary Union movement, DRUM, and the Maoists of Detroit basically got the first black mayor of Detroit elected. Coleman Young was the first black mayor of Detroit, and he was considered a fellow traveler, a friend of the Communist Party. And the Communist Party and the Maoists, and they worked very hard to get Coleman Young elected. It's fascinating history. There was a Maoist judge in Detroit for a while who was elected. And he took the American flag out of his courtroom. He would read from Mao's little red book on the bench, right? That was a big deal, this judge that was elected in Detroit. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, Detroit was the one place in the United States that the 1970s Maoists actually had power. They had power. I mean, they didn't completely run the city, but they had a huge amount of influence in Detroit in the 1970s, which is part of the reason Detroit was deindustrialized. It's part of the reason that the capitalist bosses just wrecked the city. Detroit was deindustrialized first because the capitalist bosses were so angry at the city for embracing the black revolutionary movement and embracing communism. I mean, communism had a lot of power in Detroit in the 1970s. A Maoist judge, a mayor elected who was a fellow traveler of the communists. I mean, it's fascinating history. There are many good books on the history of communism in the United States. There's a lot of stuff in particular now about the 1970s Maoist movement that's coming out. There's a book called Heavy Radicals, which is a history of the Revolutionary Communist Party in the 1970s. Heavy Radicals, it's very good. There's a book called Threat of Greatest Magnitude. Don't let these a-holes get you down. Well, thank you, Red Cat. Threat of Greatest Magnitude, which is about FBI infiltration of the Communist Party and the various communist groups in the 70s. There's a group called Revolution in the Air. There's a book called Revolution in the Air by Max Elbaum. It's a history of the Maoist movement in the 70s. There's a new book called Let Them Tremble, which is it kind of profiles leaders of the Communist Party USA post-World War II, and that's very good. It talks about Gus Hall. It talks about various figures that were very key in the Communist Party in the post-World War II era. We hear a lot about the Communist Party of the 30s. That's very good. There's a lot of very good communist history. And if we are going to be serious about building a communist movement in the United States, we need to understand people who tried to do it before, what they did, So there you go. All righty. All right. Why don't we call the synthetic left the woke right? Well, you're free to do that provocatively, but I don't think that's strategic because most people won't know what we're talking about. That'll just confuse people. If you say to people woke right, they're going to be like, the woke right, what are you talking about? And you're going to sound, and you want to be careful. You don't want to use too much lingo. Because when you use lingo, average people don't know what you're talking about. It's certainly a provocative way of putting it, calling it the woke right instead of the synthetic left. That's a provocative way of doing things. It's a good suggestion, Red Illuminati. I'm not against it. I don't think it'll work. All righty. Okay. Why did Russia and China not veto the attack on Libya in 2011? Well, at the UN Security Council, when they put forward the attack on Libya, it wasn't an attack on Libya. It was to be an arms embargo on Libya. All right, it was supposed to be that no one could send any weapons to Libya. And then the USA started a no-fly zone to enforce their arms embargo. And that's how the USA intervened. And Russia and China voted for an arms embargo, but they didn't vote for the USA to invade Libya, and that's important. And I think the other thing to remember, unfortunately, is that Gaddafi had kind of given the middle finger to Russia and China in the final years of his life, and this is important to know. Gaddafi pivoted toward the West. Obama sucked up to Gaddafi before he overthrew him. All right, that USA and Libya started getting along. Libya tortured people for the U.S. government. And Libya joined the war on terror. Got friendly first with the Bush administration, but then under Obama, they were convinced that the USA was their friend. It wasn't. The whole time the USA was seeping in influence, seeping in, elements to try and stage a color revolution. But before overthrowing Gaddafi, the US government really worked hard to court Gaddafi and to get him in their camp against Russia and China. And Gaddafi made some very, he kind of alienated Russia and China in the final years of his life. He alienated the Palestinians, too. The Palestinians were very angry at Gaddafi. And he denounced the Palestinian leadership, and so Gaddafi made a lot of enemies in his final years and started being friends with the United States. And then the United States stabbed him in the back. They did the same thing to Lukashenko. Did the exact same thing to Lukashenko. Lukashenko, you'll remember, he's the leader of Belarus, communist, anti-imperialist, has maintained the Soviet-style economy in Belarus, but he has been having a fight with the Russian leaders. He and Vladimir Putin were not getting along. Russia and Belarus were not getting along. So he started cozying up to the United States, right? Getting friendly with the United States. And then what happened? The United States was able to seep its forces in there, and then now they're having color revolution problems in Belarus, right? The United States is not a very good friend. The United States is not a very good friend. Iran, they made the Iran nuclear deal, and the United States stabbed him in the back. So I think that's what we can learn from this, right? The United States, they want you to believe, we're your buddy, we're your friend. And at the end of the day, not so much. So, Libya is a great example of that. Ramiro says similar with Manuel Noriega. Yeah, Noriega was at first an agent of the United States, but he became kind of a Bonapartist strongman and started nationalizing stuff and moving in kind of an anti-imperialist direction. In Noriega's case, it was more a case of he had been like an agent of the United States, but he started to move in a more anti-imperialist direction in his leadership of Panama. But it's similar to that, true. All right. Big business profiteering off the pandemic. Yeah, it's an outrage to see, Walmart making out like bandits, Amazon making out like bandits from the pandemic. It's awful. I had a test for COVID last week to make sure I didn't have it. It was negative. But I went to multiple places before I got one. And there were places, that tried to charge me, to get same-day results, like $110. I kid you not. There was a place, I was in line to get the COVID test, and they said, well, if you get it here, yeah, it's free, but you'll only get your result 2 or 3 days later, but you can pay $110, and then you'll get it. And I have really good insurance, but they wanted me to pay $110 for a test. Well, I found another place where I got a test for free. That's unbelievable. That company that is trying to charge people $110 to get their COVID test results on that day, that's criminal in my view. This is a pandemic. We should have tests everywhere for everybody all the time. Period. Right? There's a whole line of people ready to go in there. This place that's going to try to get you to pay $110 for your COVID test results. Unbelievable. We should have COVID test results for everybody all the time. Rapid testing immediately. What is wrong with these corporations, right? And you can get a rapid test, and I found another place. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you can't get a rapid test in New York. You can, and I got one. I found another place, and I got one. But there was a place that was trying to, gouge people for rapid tests, and that's criminal in my view. All right. How do we bring back the intellectual left? Glad you asked. That's what we're doing here at the Center for Political Innovation. And we're having the Webconference tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we are going to and we are building the Center for Political Innovation post-pandemic. We are going to actually start having in-person events. And the big event is next week, fingers crossed. Next week, fingers crossed. We will next week, fingers crossed, next week, we will be publishing the Center for Political Innovation Educational Manual, which will be a book, a very cheap book. It'll be very accessible. that will have enough in it that you could give Marxism classes. And it will have a study guide. It'll have, in addition to the opening essay of my book, City Builders and Vandals in Our Age, it'll also have some selected essays from Mao, selected essays from Marx and Lenin, and it'll be a textbook through which you could have study sessions. And it'll be very, very good. I think it'll be great. So yeah, I really recommend it. I really, really recommend it. It's going to be out pretty soon, the Center for Political Innovation Educational Manual. So that's very exciting. I'm very excited about getting it done. I've got somebody helping with questions. The proofreader is going over it, and we got the layout guy lined up. So as soon as I get it back from the proofreader and read it all myself, to make sure that the proofreader didn't miss anything, then I'll hand it over to the layout guy. I also have to pick out the graphics, and then somebody else is writing some of the questions, but I have to go over some of the questions. And it's not easy to put out a book. Publishing a book is not the easiest thing in the world. You got to do a lot of work. But we're going to have the official educational manual of the Center for Political Innovation soon. And with that educational manual, anybody could start having reading groups and classes over basic Marxist concepts. That's very exciting. So tune in tomorrow night for our web conference for the Center for Political Innovation. It'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's going to be great. Yeah, very good. All right, folks, on that note, I think we'll conclude tonight's broadcast. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, the people of all countries must get prepared. Revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, the people of all countries must get prepared. Revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night.